So I have a standard for bringing messages on Sunday, that my messages are supposed to be inspiring. They're supposed to call you to a place for a better life. I'm making an exception this morning. What's been on everybody's mind for the last year and a half is a pandemic based on a virus that they named COVID-19. Did you know that 19 it's not named that because of the year they found it? It's named that because this is the 19th coronavirus. I know, I didn't know that till I read it a few weeks ago. And I want to talk about a virus, but not COVID. I want to talk about this virus called Wetiko. Who's ever heard of Wetiko? Okay, nobody's ever heard of it. I've got the right audience this morning. So I was introduced to this term last week, and it intrigued me because it actually, it's not a virus like COVID. It doesn't impact the body. It's a mind virus. And it comes to us, the word Wetiko comes from the Cree Nation, from the indigenous people of what's now called Canada. Obviously, the Cree have been around longer than that. That's why they call them up their First Nation. But the Cree people came up with this term, and they call it a virus. And what they say it is, they say quite a bit about it. And there's a number of articles available online about it. So I did my research and read a number of things about it and made some notes. And because this is all new to me, I'm going to rely a little bit strongly on my notes right now. But here's what I want you here's what people say about Wetiko, this virus. They say that some call it the spirit of evil that terrorizes the world. Now that kind of creeped me out, so I kept going. And then I found that some relate it to or liken it to what's called cluster B personality disorders, which are characterized as dramatic, overly emotional, and unpredictable thinking and behavior, including being antisocial, narcissistic, and being borderline personality. Sounds like fun, right? And everybody's going, well, it's not me. So let me give you more. Still others call it a dark, toxic, predatory state of being that is highly selfish and hostile. It's been called the cancer of the soul. Nasty. And then there's a theorist from England that has studied it and calls it simply mind blindness. Mind blindness. Now maybe that's the place where I tend to resonate with this. And it's true that all of the descriptors claim that this is not new, that it's been around since the beginning of the human experience. And that it's really about people operating with major blind spots so that they don't really get what they're doing. So some books have been written about it, and probably the major one is called Dispelling Wetiko. It's by a writer named Paul Levy. And Levy tells us some interesting things about this. He relates it to the autoimmune diseases of the body. And if you know what that is, that's when the body actually turns on itself and starts damaging itself in an attempt to get rid of something that doesn't need to be getting rid of, something that's already healthy and whole. In his book, Dispelling Wetiko, he has several things that he talks about that I want to share with you. He says people under the thrall of Wetiko, like someone in the throes of an addiction or in a state of trauma, is unwittingly creating the very problem they are trying to resolve, clinging desperately to the thing that is torturing and destroying them. He says that Wetiko is a disease in which individuals express and experience themselves as separate from everything else. Separate from everything else. In extreme cases, people with this disease project their shadow selves onto others while accusing them of shooting their shadow self on the person. They say suffering from this form of what some call psychic blindness tends to leaves someone in a state where they think they can see, but they can't. They can't really see what's going on. And ultimately, Wetiko disease causes the afflicted to become exactly what they most fear, leading to dangerous levels of paranoia and self-abuse. Paradoxically, these people try to destroy others' light while simultaneously trying to take their light. You all can relate to that idea. And there's another writer that writes about it named Jack Forbes. He's a Native American man, or was. He's passed on. He writes this disease, this watico, also called cannibal psychosis, is the greatest pandemic known to man. The greatest pandemic known to man. We are a species, and all in the midst of a massive psychic epidemic of virulent collective psychosis that has been brewing in the cauldron of humanity's psyche from the beginning of time. So you might be asking yourself, okay, this is kind of creepy. Apparently some people think it's really important. And why am I talking about it? And I'm talking about it because as I read more and more about it, I realized that this has characteristics of viruses. And I can see why they've called it a mental or a mind blindness, because people aren't all that aware of it. It's sort of like with the COVID thing, how so many people got it and didn't know they had it. But by having the virus, they were infecting other people because they just didn't get it. It wasn't part of their conscious awareness that was going on. That kind of relates to this thing. It's saying this Wetiko thing is something that's going on in people that they don't even know it's there. They think they're just fine. It sort of reminds me of the woman that Barbara was talking about in the store, in her Best of Barbara today. And if you're watching at home and you haven't watched it yet, go back and watch Barbara's message on prosperity. It's brilliant. And in that, she talked about this woman that she realized really didn't want her wisdom. Well, of course not, because that woman was saying all the problems are out there. And this whole thing makes people afraid. It makes them suspicious. It makes them believe that the world is created in this great separation, and that it's really the things outside of them that are creating the problems in their lives. And as I did more and more of this, looking at this, what I came to realize was that we've all got a little of this. That this isn't something that just some people have. I mean, obviously, I think people who tend to be what's called sensates would be very highly likely to have this, because they rely on their their five senses for everything that is real. And I want to assure you, and I'm sure most of you understand this, that just because you can't see, hear, touch, taste, or feel it doesn't mean it's not there. That there's lots of things going on in this experience of life that you can't see, touch, taste, smell, or feel. Like, well, you can feel it a little bit. You can feel it when the wind blows. But in this room right now, can anybody feel the air? Not really. It's invisible. But if it wasn't there, we'd all just die. And there's lots more stuff. And it's not even physical stuff. There's things in other dimensions and realms that are going on constantly. Don't think that they're not. When you think that they're not, then and you're relying only on those five senses, then that's all you've got. And you think that anything else is not real. There's lots of stuff going on. I believe there's more stuff going on you can't see than there is that you can. Yep. So what do we do about this Wetiko thing, especially if we've all been infected at some level or another? What can we possibly do about it? How can we impact our lives so that this doesn't become chronic, so that it doesn't become serious in our case? As I looked at it, it seemed to me that pretty much all mental illness could be included in this, because all mental illness tends to create separation. Even not just for the person that seems to be afflicted, but for how everyone else deals with them. So there's this great thing of separation that happens in the human experience where we don't want to see that, where we don't want to be a part of that. But even it is the native people that came up with this term watico, and actually the native people have come up with a number of terms that have that speak very, very clearly about the opposite of it. I want to find them real quick in my notes. I know that they're here because I wrote them down. Isn't that interesting? Usually they jump out at me. So I will remember the two that come to mind immediately. One, it comes from the people of Central America, the native people, and they say this phrase, in Lakin, in Lakesh, or in Lakesh, in Lakin. And what that means is, I am another yourself, and you are another myself. To understand that there really is no separation. There may be separate bodies, but not a separate presence. And then the North Americans, this originated with the Lakota people, they have a phrase called mitakuyasin. And the way the native people pray, and many other nations beyond the Lakota have accepted this as the way that they end their prayers. They say, aho mitakuyasin. And that means all my relations, or I am one with all things. So they understand this idea of oneness. This idea of oneness that we talk about here all the time. And you may be sitting there going, I understand oneness. That's not an issue. Well, I don't care if you understand it. What I want to know is, are you living according to it? Are you seeing yourself in everyone else? Are you understanding that there is nothing separate from you? Can you understand that the presence of the divine dwells at every point with every being in every way, without exception? And are you living your life according to that knowing? The great test over the past several years has been finding God in Donald Trump. Could you do that? Could you find the presence of the divine, a perfect being of light, in that life? Or, in your case, hundreds of other people that you've met along the way? Or do we keep our distance because they're dangerous, they're wrong, they're bad, they're evil? If we play that game, and I'm not suggesting that we have to resonate with everybody on the planet. That's ridiculous. We don't. We don't resonate with everyone. But if we judge them and find them wrong, the one that suffers from that is the one that's thinking that. The other person doesn't care, you know? And maybe what we don't like about them is that their watico is showing, you know? And if we're having those thoughts, then it may not be showing, but our watico is active. So the answer to me in all of this is to start looking at where this isn't working and start applying the concept of oneness as a reality in our lives, as a practice in our lives, rather than just a concept. And I know as well as anybody that that's not easy to do all the time. It's not. There's a lovely story or question, and I guess it's part of a story, that Emerson writes in his essay on self-reliance, where he asks a question. And what the question is, let me make sure I get this right. There are two men going out into the woods. And in the woods, in the forest, there are venomous snakes. Most places on the planet, that's true. The two men do this differently. One man wears knee-high boots, leather boots, and carries a big stick. The other man wears moccasins and knows the nature of the snake. Which man is safer? I believe the man with the moccasins. Thank you very much. Because he understands the nature of this being, which causes him not to be afraid of it, not to be concerned about it, but by knowing how it acts in a natural setting, is able to relate to it, not upset it, not sticking your hand to your foot in a place where you can't see, not being startled and jumping if you see a snake, but knowing how the snake is going to act. And every snake, maybe there's a few, I've heard of snakes in India that don't do this, but every snake, certainly in this part of the world, when they get that you're there, they will turn around and leave. They are not looking for trouble. But if they feel like they're being attacked by your presence, they will attack back. Now, this is logical, right? This is a logical idea that I was never privy to in my youth, because my mother was terrorized of snakes. She hated them. She would scream and carry on them if there was even the concept, even if there was the snake was on the television, she would freak out. And she told me that was all based on what happened to her when she was a child, when she was a little girl playing around the farm where she lived, and that, I'm told, was out in Fairview, that she was playing around in the field and all but stepped on a coiled moccasin. It wasn't until I moved to these mountains that I learned that there are no moccasins here. So it must have been a black snake, right? And black snakes will bite, but they are not venomous, so they can't really hurt you other than nick you. So about a week ago, I was standing at our bedroom door, it's glass French doors, looking out over our deck into the woods, and I watched a black snake come out of our hot tub. A decent-sized black snake. Now, I know some things about black snakes. They're not dangerous. They're very helpful because they eat rodents, and they will keep venomous snakes away. They're wonderful, wonderful things to have around if you live in a wooded area, which we do. That does not stop me from seeing the snake and going, ah! Because my mother still lives within me. So I have this duality thing going on in me that I have to continually work on. And that snake coming out of the hot tub comes to mind every so often, and I have to deal with it. But I'm dealing with it, and I'm knowing that it's a good thing for that snake to be there, and I'm okay with it. And I've known that there were snakes around the hot tub for years because in the winter when it's nice and warm, they all huddle up under it. Never been a problem, only in mind. So where else in the world do we have things going on where we're finding fault, where we're being distressed maybe by an unknown factor of something, by someone that we are giving way too much attention to because they're acting out? How many places are we doing that rather than realizing, like Barbara did in her talk, that everyone's entitled to think what they want to think and live the way they want to live? But if we're going to gather like this, and we're going to have people joining us online around the world, shouldn't we really move this oneness thing from a concept to a practice? From an idea to a way of life? I believe that we can. And I believe that that is the immunization to watico, that we can all self-immunize. We're probably already doing it because we see this as our path to live in oneness beyond just the concept. And perhaps with this, we're finding a way to live from that place where life really works, rather than a sad place of dysfunctional ideas and aspects of our lives. So this is just a different kind of way that I thought I would present this to you. And recognizing that I am as guilty of this as anyone in this room, that I forget. And as Barbara has taught us for years, it's not your first thought, it's your second thought that is most important. Because we can recognize that something's not working, and when we do, we can change it, we can look at it and go, is that really what I want in my life? Or could I do this better? Could I do this in a way that serves me and the people around me better? And if we can do that, our lives get better. I mentioned that yesterday was Juneteenth, and I want to repeat that for this message to say that when the Emancipation Proclamation became the law of the land, by the time it got all the way out to Texas, we were ready for all of us to be free. Because even though there was slavery, there was also the people that held slaves against their will. Those people may not have liked what happened on that day, but it was the best thing that could have happened. So keep in mind too, when something isn't working in your life, when you want it just to go away, that maybe there's a gift in it that you just don't see yet. Maybe there's something wonderful happening. Move beyond your senses, use your intuition, and see the truth of your life. There's always an answer if you'll ask the question. There's always a way to see the value of what's happening if you'll just look at it with an open heart and an open mind. And that's our work. Our work is to remember the oneness of spirit wherever we are, whatever we do. And when we do, our life's working good. So what can you do to check the watico in your life? I'll leave you with that question. See what you come up with. I love you all very much. Thank you.